Hi, I'm Danielle, and you're listening to the Talk Carby to Me podcast.
I'm very happy to announce that I have my old Pilates mentor here joining us on the Talk Carby to Me podcast. So, Danielle Mudry, welcome finally to the show.
Thank you. I am excited to be here, and we should have done this before.
Yes, long overdue. Welcome to the show. Um, how's your day going?
My day is good. Well, it's a little dreary out, but it's good. Um, yeah. How about you?
It's pretty solid. As you can see in my little setup here, I've created darkness at all times. My cave, so we love that.
Which goes with your personality of dark and mysterious.
A dark and mysterious place.
Hmm.
Also, I have. I'll tell everyone I have really sensitive eyes, but Uh, it's realistically, I don't know. When I was young, I used to walk around in the dark a lot because I had this fear because my parents worked a lot. So in my early teen years, I was home a lot. So if someone breaks into the house and it's dark, like they don't know the landscape, so I do. So I got used to walking around in the
Mm.
dark. And as a habit, as I got older, I have really good night vision. I don't turn on any lights, and it has nothing to do with my electric bill. It's just I like to be that comfortable with my surroundings where I can just navigate in the dark. So that's kind of a long way of how I arrived at being Batman, basically.
Yes, you are Batman. Dark and mysterious, as always.
Yeah. So I see you finally got your Saturday off.
I did. I finally got weekends off after a good 8 years of working Saturdays. Yeah, so that was a nice thing to finally get. I was the only one of like all the original gangsters who was still working on the weekends. I mean, you know, they would come in as if they wanted to, but I was the only one who was actually like scheduled to work on a weekend. So it's been wonderful to have my weekends off finally. I haven't had that since pre-lifetime.
Yeah. So my friend Danielle here, she is a incredibly experienced Pilates instructor. Some might call her a master of the craft. So today we're going to be talking about Pilates, why it's good for your health, why it's good for your fitness, why it's good for just your mind, body, and soul. Some of the benefits. We will talk about a little bit of myth bust that surrounds uh, the practice as well, and kind of go along anything else that comes up along the way. We'll dabble in as well. But myself being a Pilates instructor, just much junior to Danielle here, figured it'd be nice to have her on so she can share with us her expertise and probably teach us a thing or two about it.
I'm here for all of it.
Yes. So, how long have you been a Pilates instructor?
So I have been a Pilates instructor since 2003. That was when I got my first Pilates certification. In the Pilates world, it's called a contemporary certification, which, unlike how you and I are trained, it's a little bit more a la carte, right? So exercises are structured, are not so structured. They are a little bit more pick and choose. And so in 2003, I got my first Pilates certification and I was teaching for a while. And then this was when I was living in New Jersey. And then the club that I was working at brought in a different kind of Pilates certification, which is called more classical work. I got certified in that in 2009. And that's kind of where I've gone with Pilates. It's been more towards the classical side. I moved to North Carolina in 2009 and I stepped away from Pilates for a while because the gym or the club that I was working at wasn't offering it. So I fell back on my personal trainer certification and was just doing personal training. Then when Lifetime came into Raleigh in 2015, I stepped back into the Pilates world because they had said they were having a really hard time finding Pilates instructors. And when they looked at my resume, they were like, "Oh, you're a Pilates instructor." I was like, "Well, I am, but I've kind of stepped away from it for a while." And they were like, "Well, dust off your books because that's where we need you." So I got back into the Pilates world and I jumped in with both feet and went through my whole entire certification again, just as a big refresher. and I've been doing it ever since. And I am now, what's 2023, so we're at like almost 9 years um, doing classical work. So that's kind of my jump into Pilates, and of course, there's a whole lot of more background, but of my fitness journey, but that's just my Pilates part.
Awesome. So what were you doing before Pilates?
So I started, well, you mean like pre-Pilates, like pre-fitness or pre-Pilates?
Uh, I guess fitness. How did you get into fitness? Like, what were you doing before fitness? And
So when I first started working, I worked on the trading floor of the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, and I worked there for a good 10 years. And I wound up getting laid off. And I was working out, and the person who was running our group fitness department at the club that I was working at or working out at in New Jersey said to me, and she changed my life, said to me, you should be an instructor. So my first foray into fitness was actually as a spin instructor. So I was a spin instructor first, and her name is, well, my mentor there, and her name is Gina Berta, and she still mentors me to this day. So I was a spinning instructor first, and then I became a personal trainer. And she said to me, we're going to get certified. One day she came to me, she said, we're going to get certified in Pilates. And I said, we are? And she said, yeah. Now, got to remember, I'm like 32 at this point. She said, Danielle, you're not going to be able to teach spinning. You're not going to be able to do body pump. You're not going to be able to teach all this high impact stuff when you're in your 50s. And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean I'm not going to be able to teach this all in my 50s? Are you kidding me? Like, I'm bionic. I'm never going to get injured. I'm going to be doing this forever. And she was like, no, you're not. So we're going to get certified in Pilates, and we're going to teach Pilates, and we're going to do Pilates basically until we're dead. And I was like, okay, whatever you say, Gina. So that's where we got our classical cert. And uh, I have thanked her just about every day of my fitness life ever since, because she was absolutely right. As someone who's in their 50s, if I had to go in and do all of that crazy stuff now, I would be injured, I would be crippled, there would be no way. I would be out of the fitness industry, or I would be searching for something else. So Pilates is in that realm. Pilates is awesome for um, being able to do and teach until you retire from it, which would be never. So,
so you mentioned your mentor, and she hits you with that. You're not going to be able to do this. I understand it to the context that the concept is saying like, hey, this specific thing is going to be pretty hard. But was there a part of you that took that like as motivation, like, haha, I'll show you just like a little bit as far as maybe some form of activity into your very youthful 35-year-old current self?
um, did I take it? No, I didn't take it as a challenge, or um, I didn't take it as a challenge. I really didn't. I kind of, because she was a few years older than I am. Well, she is a few years older than I. I mean, not by much. I mean, maybe 6 or 7 years. And I kind of just looked at it like, she's been in this business already. By this point, she's already been in this business for 10 years. I'm like in it for 5 minutes. So she obviously has seen more, knows more, you know, is more experienced in all of this. So I didn't look at it as she was trying to, as I didn't look at it as a challenge, and as if you know me, Aunt, I'm not really competitive, right? I'm not competitive with other people. I'm just not. I want everybody to do well. So, but I will tell you this. It's funny that we say that, because at this point, I still do, I mean, of course, I still do weight training. I still have personal training clients. I still do all that stuff, although now it looks much different. My weight training looks much different than it did in its 30s, but I still do it.
Yeah. So that had to be like a huge jump going from a trading environment on a stock exchange floor, and now you're going into fitness and Pilates. And we'll talk a little bit more, obviously about Pilates as we go, but there's such a contrast there. However, with me, myself as well, I came from retail where I was always at sales teams. I was always selling stuff. It was a little high paced. How do you think that helped you as you got into fitness and kind of like started to go down this road, and like what was some of the biggest differences that you noticed about it?
So I will tell you this, and this is something that I say all the time in relation to just working on the exchange floor, is that so see, I didn't go to college, right? So I don't have that experience of those 4 years being away from home and that higher education as far as college goes. So I started working right at 18. Being on the trading floor of the stock exchange skewed my perception of money because you'll see people gain and lose so much money in a day, and they have the people that work there or have worked there for a while have such a skewed perception of $500 to the average person is a decent amount of money. I mean, that wasn't even like they would spend that on lunch and not think anything of it. I mean, I watched people lose $600,000 in a day and go home and not worry about it, and then come back in the next day and make it all back. So it skewed my perception of money from a very young age, to where I had to actually, when I got out into like the real world, as I like to call it, I had to like reevaluate money and its worth. So that was kind of one of the things that I've learned. It taught me to be on my feet all day because when you work on the trading floor, you don't sit down. And then remember, got to remember, this is like 1987 through like 1999. So it taught me to be on my feet all day. It taught me to keep moving. Um, it taught me how to deal with very different personalities. It taught me that's how it helped me move, like kind of go into fitness. Um, maybe a little bit physically, definitely helped me deal with, different personalities and stuff like that, and how to almost not lose myself in it, but be a little bit of a chameleon and try to figure out what people need, physically and mentally,
Yeah.
because that's kind of what fitness is, right? You have to figure out what they need physically and give them that, but also figure out what do they need a little bit mentally, because sometimes you can become, as sometimes you can become a little bit of a therapist, and you got to give people 80% of what they need and 20% of what they want, and 20% sometimes people is listening.
Yeah, it is funny that so you mentioned the desensitization. Is that a word? Or
Well, it is now.
it is now. I just made it up. Added to the dictionary of money. Um, because when you look at the fitness world, so like I've dealt with this myself also. So for two reasons: one, I worked in retail forever. I was selling expensive appliances, furnishing people's
Yeah,
homes. I've
I
had
remember.
yeah, I've had monster sales for doctors, lawyers, very successful people. So it kind of desensitized me to it. Same thing with gambling. It's no secret I love to gamble. It's one of the things I enjoy. I'm pretty responsible to it. So the money swings don't really, they just don't register to me as like a normal people. When I got into fitness, and you end up seeing the people who are successful in their lives and they need help and services, you don't as you don't have the fear of offering something because you think it's expensive,
Right.
which in turn, I think, looking at how we create trainers and fitness professionals, that's probably the biggest mistake that they have in the industry, where there is no sales training. It's kind of like,
Right.
this is your quads, this is this exercise, and they just throw you in the fire, and you're like selling mortgages, and it's like, oh my god. So
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the therapist part is hilarious. We very much do end up being the therapist, for our people. I think one of the things, I've talked about this on the podcast before. So obviously, me and Danielle used to work together. So we were together like 50 hours a week, it seems, most
A
times.
lot.
Um, Going through and having that many people just emotionally dump on you. And sometimes it's emotional, but sometimes it's just life dump, or I need to vent. Like, you're the person that they vent to because you're listening and guiding them through their thing. It becomes so taxing sometimes. And as far as doing that, so it's one of the things that I've appreciated about kind of getting away from having a massive schedule. I have a little bit more bandwidth. There's a little bit more brain power to me, that kind of comes through. But it's very, very funny that you do that, because it is something that is like a known thing. Like, even I've had clients that have gone to their therapist, and their therapist are like, "Wow, this dude sounds like a therapist." Like, and it's just funny that you touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely do become almost like a therapist. And, I think, the difference between, having a male trainer and a female trainer are, we're different emotionally, right? It's not, one's not better or worse. It's just we're different emotionally. So women, I find, are a little bit more empathetic, um, because we are, and because we are emotional. And so we tend to maybe go a little bit more of the sympathize, empathize route, whereas I think men go a little bit more of the logical, um, straightforward route. And it makes for just for, different personalities, but you take on that energy from your people, you know, during the day. And, when you have a day where you're training 8 hours in a row or 9 hours in a row, and you don't give yourself a break, or you only have 1 hour, but, by the time you walk out the door and you're driving home, like, I don't even turn on the radio. I don't want to hear any speak. I don't want to hear any speak. I don't want to hear any voice. I don't even, especially my own. And when I get home, like, my husband can read me when I get in the door. Like, he takes a look at me and he's like, we either want to be quiet, or how are we feeling today? So, you know, but that you definitely can take on people's energy. And, uh, not that it's a bad thing, because you care about your people and you want them to be good mentally and physically, but you have to take care of yourself too. So, and I totally understand that with you, just knowing you, you're very, you'll take on people's stuff. And, you I think you have only so much of this.
Yeah, I've been known to don a cape a time or two, and
Yes.
I can
Yeah.
save you. It's like it's like one of those things.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I can fix you. Like, yes, please.
Yes.
That's so. When we look at Pilates, this form as a modality, to get from point A to point B. Point A being where you are, point B being where you want to be. Um, at this point in our industry, there's like 7 billion different ways that you can kind of go. A few of them stand out and have made it into mainstream. Obviously, fitness and exercise. When you think of that, everyone's first thought is, "Oh, go pick up a weight, something heavy, haha." Or strangely, it's running. Pilates, it seems, is one of the most effective ways for the majority of folks in existence when they talk about, because a good way of putting it, and Johan said it best on our episode, people, they seek a professional in the forms of exercise to either not die, or they want to look good naked.
Mm. Sounds just like him, yes.
Yeah. And so for the folks that don't want to die, a lot of times when they come into us, what they're dealing with, chronic pain, they've got back pain, they've got knee pain, hip pain, they just don't feel
Hmm.
right, they're not energized. So when you look at Pilates, I think that flies under the radar, as far as something that can get you those benefits. So when you look at Pilates, you'll obviously see you have like club Pilates, group Pilates, Pilates
Hmm.
fusion classes, all these different things. Then you have regular Pilates, reformer Pilates. So in terms of what we'll be talking about today, it's probably going to be the majority of it being, reformer and comprehensive Pilates, like as you were explaining. But what is the best description that you can say for Pilates, like what it actually is?
So if I had to just put it in a sentence, Pilates is core work. It is core work. Like, when people come in and I give them a complimentary session, I always say, disclaimer, this is not weight training. Even though you're working on equipment, this is not weight training. This is core work. And every core exercise you ever see being done in any modality or form is some version of Pilates. We're doing it somehow, some way, and nobody's reinventing the wheel. Okay, so, and I know I sound like a Pilates snob, which I kind of am, so I'll own that. So, but that's how I kind of describe Pilates to a person who walks in and says, I want to try this because, my sister's friend does it, or my aunt does it, or this person does it, and they rave about it and they say how great it is and how good they feel. And I try to break it down into the very simplest things, but I always tell people that the best way to understand it is to actually do it, because there's no way to really put it into words, because there's so many layers to it. There's so many layers of Pilates. If I had to break it down to the very basics, we're moving your spine. We're flexing it, we're extending it, we're laterally flexing it, and we're rotating it. And then the muscles around it get stretched and toned. So when you see people who are older and they're hunched over and they're shuffling, it's because their spine's not flexible. And also it has a lot to do with the foot and the ankle and all that stuff with shuffle. But most of the time, it is because their spine is inflexible. So in Pilates, we're really moving your spine around, and then the muscles are kind of the icing on the cake, and they get to get toned because they get to get stretched, they get lengthened, but they also get um, they also uh, and then not that they get tightened, but they get stronger. They get stronger.
Oh,
And Pilates moves you in the way that you should move in life. It moves you so you're not getting injured. Because most of the time, and you know this, when people come in and they have back pain or they're injured, you know, they've moved they've moved in a different way, or they haven't moved. They don't move enough.
yeah. One of my views on fitness, and when we look at movement, and when you just, so for me, when I walk out into the world and I go to the grocery store, I'm giving everyone a visual assessment of how they move. And a lot of times I'll walk by someone and I'm like, oh, wow, you move like shit.
Right. Oh, without a doubt.
Or it's like, oh, wow, you must have injured your leg, or, something's going on in your hip. When you talk about spinal mobility, a good way to look at it is if you look at a 7-year-old, what they do, how they move around, how they interact with space around them. And you look at a 40-year-old, your typical 40-year-old, not necessarily in the greatest shape, just the average, human. There's so much difference in how they move. And a lot of, you can see the differences in their posture. And like a 7-year-old, you can nearly bend them in half and they're not going to break. Most 40-year-olds, you bend them too much the wrong way, they're gonna be like, oh, my back, or it's just not going to go very far. So a lot of it too, and when you look at as far as like age and stuff like that, a lot of people are like, well, hey, I'm 35 now, or I'm 40, or I'm 50 or 60, and like I feel like I'm old. And then you look at see people that you have like, oh, I feel great at those ages. And a lot of it has to do with how well their spine actually moves, because it influences everything else around it, because that's like the center of your body. So everything that moves around is interacting with that aspect of your frame.
Yes, agreed. So, Joseph Pilates used to say, you're only as young as your spine.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's a
Joseph,
famous quote.
yeah, which is very true. So Joseph Pilates invented, like, when was Pilates invented?
So, Joseph Pilates kind of formed his method um, in like the early 1900s. He kind of brought it all together. So it is a series of exercises that's done in a certain order, right? It's flexion, extension of the spine, it's rotation, it's lateral movement of the spine, and it's done in a certain order, and it's strength, it's all for your core, right? So he invented it early in the 1900s, and he also invented and patented 26 pieces of apparatus, and that's what they're called, apparatus. He was born in the late 1800s. He was in World War One. He was captured. He was a nurse, and when he was incarcerated, he started to form his method. And it wasn't called Pilates until he actually died. It was called controlology because it was meant to have you get control over your body. So he used to rehabilitate soldiers in World War One that had gotten injured. And what they were seeing was not only were they rehabilitating and stronger than when they went in, they also were not getting sick, as far as like, because that was really when the Spanish flu took out like a third of the world's population. So, and we all know that your immune system is in your gut, right? So he found that, or they found that people who had worked with him were not getting sick, and if they were getting better. They weren't dying. So that's when they kind of started realizing that that's where your immune system originates. Interesting, right?
That's awesome. So
And
do
then
you? Oh wait, were you? Sorry to cut you off.
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just going to continue on with his history, but
Oh, before we get into that, so with him being a nurse, do you think that has something to do with the overall look and feel of a Pilates studio, where some of it kind of looks like a medical hospital bed or some kind of like apparatus that like is out of a torture place, kind of?
that's actually exactly right. And Pilates reformers, classical Pilates reformers, are the dimensions. Maybe a little bit. They probably have grown a little bit inches in since then because people are bigger now. Um, they are the exact dimensions of a hospital bed because that's what he used. That was the only thing that he used. He would attach springs over the hospital beds and he would really rehabilitate them as they laid there. So that's why a reformer looks like a bed. Um, but and obviously he made adjustments to it and patented his reformer and called it a reformer because it reforms your body. It reforms you.
Yeah, I find it, and obviously like I went through the process of becoming a Pilates instructor, and when you see like old clips, it's wild to see, and they're like,
Wild.
and of course, just me being me, my brain instantly jumps to, if anyone has time, YouTube, go to Joseph Pilates doing his stuff. It's very interesting. I don't think it would survive in that method today, obviously, because
Oh.
he's teaching in his tidy whities. His
Yeah.
patients are just completely topless, and like they're going through the motions, and like he's grabbing their ponytail and just like yanking them through, and you can see the different shapes that they're taking. And it's just obviously it's probably a good thing that it's evolved to a level of sophistication that's rarely found in other modalities. But it's very entertaining to go back and see like the way that it was initially done. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no way that you could train somebody like that these days. I mean, he's in there pushing down on their backs and, everything's really fast and it would be crazy. I mean, you would break somebody today. So, it's more about being auditory and being able to express what you want verbally. There are times when you really need to touch people and put them in the correct positions to get the exercise, the exercise to execute correctly, but it is really it really should be based on auditory being auditory and getting your client into the position you want through words. And some people don't learn like that. I find that men tend to be more auditory, women are more visual. They need to see things. So there's that too. The one thing I do love about Pilates is this is you know, since it is supposed to be auditory, I always tell new instructors, what happens if you're injured and you actually can't show this? How are you going to get your person into that position and have them execute what you're looking for if you can't say it? So work on your verbal stuff before you get your hands in there and start manipulating people. Um,
that was the biggest adjustment for me. So anyone who's ever trained with me or seen me train, I don't talk much. I'll explain the exercise. I set it up. After that, it's I don't speak while you're working. I either say good, no, fix this, but I don't cue within the exercise other than all right, let's get like up, down, whatever we're doing. So learning that, one of the things that kind of was an adjustment for me, a huge adjustment, was just speaking so much, because there's almost like it's almost like a guided type thing, and I'm just like I just want to demonstrate it for you. Hey, do what I'm doing, and in the training world, that's not too bad. Usually works out pretty well. But when you go into a studio, like being able to use that inflection, and have that cadence and the rhythm to it, was definitely a challenge I found for myself. And even going through the motion. So you touched on men being a little bit more auditory. Like sometimes like I'm going through there and I'm trying to muscle through things, as opposed to how you're saying, it's core work. You want to start everything from the center and kind of work out. So I was not ready for the choreography of it, to say the least.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's almost like a choreographed dance, right? So,
Yeah.
and you'll find that, and you would find as the more advanced you get in Pilates as a teacher and as a student, the less you should have to speak. If you, as a teacher, the more advanced that, you get your students, the less direction you should really need to give them, because you really should just finesse the exercises because they should know them at that point. So when you're going through a Pilates repertoire, right, you teach your students the repertoire, and repetition is where they learn, right? And as you get your student more advanced, the less you should need to cue them and the more you're just looking to fine tune what they're doing. So at the beginner level, there's a lot more speaking. As you get more advanced, there's a lot less. And it only becomes when it's really necessary, because you want people to move, and you can't rapid fire, you know, 10 10 cues at them and expect them to, and people freeze. They just freeze. And you got to let people move and correct as you go.
Yeah. So when you look at Pilates, the benefits of it, which we've touched on, if we get super specific, right? Like, so what segments of the population are Pilates good for?
So, as there's a saying that like Pilates is for everybody, but it's not for everybody, right? Everybody really should be doing it, and everybody can benefit from it. So it also comes down to who should do Pilates. It also comes down to your goal, right? What are you trying to do? People walk into the Pilates studio and they say, my goal is weight loss. And I go, well, great. That's not this. I mean, if you're going from somebody who's completely sedentary to somebody who's moving, who just is going to start moving, yeah, you'll lose some weight. But if weight loss is your goal, you really need to be on the fitness floor, and Pilates should be a alternate day. It should be like an alternate modality for you, either like a recovery workout or something that is like a thank you to your body after a week of doing, everything else that you're doing physically. Uh, it's great for athletes. With athletes, when they come in to the studio, they progress, but athletes progress kind of minimally because they're already in great shape, right? So it can enhance whatever they're doing as far as sports, but they're pretty much, like I said, they're pretty much in great shape as it is. So they'll see a little bit of advancement in their sport. They'll probably realize that they get injured less, that they are a little bit more, they recover a little quicker, and they're a little bit more flexible. If you're somebody who is sedentary and you're coming into Pilates, that's the people who really gain the most, because they will automatically see how much more flexible they get, probably in a short period of time. They will see that they move better, that they sleep better, that they are more balanced, more controlled, a little bit, like I said, a little bit more flexible. They stand a little straighter. Um, all of these great things that Pilates does, will kind of come to fruition. And if you're a good Pilates instructor with your clients, you're giving them homework, things to do when they're not with you, that enhance what they do when they come back to see you.
It's good that you brought on, we'll dive deeper into that, but on the topic of what you just talked about, athletes, I always think it's super interesting when you look at, when you're watching an athlete perform and how they move and how they interact, and you hear what they do to stay in shape. You don't always hear that it's Pilates, right? So looking at doing some research here on the topic itself, right? Athletes and Pilates. Looked up who are 10 athletes that do Pilates, and I'll name them off. You've got LeBron James. For those of you that don't know, is the best basketball player of all time. I don't want to hear any other choices. If you're familiar with him, he's in year 21. He really hasn't been injured. Like he went like 17 years before having like a significant injury. Uh,
Hmm.
you got you got my favorite athlete of all time, Kobe Bryant, right? Who played, also had a 20-year career, 5 championships. You've got Tiger Woods. We know all his story, and until late in his life, his back really fell apart. Andy Murray, Kerry Walsh Jennings, who's an Olympic gold medalist. You have Antonio Brown, who loaded with CTE. However, incredible shape,
Yeah.
incredibly gifted athlete. He has done Pilates. You have Cristiano Ronaldo, probably the most in shape person on the planet, also the most popular person on the planet, doing Pilates. And he actually does more, from what I was reading, does a little bit more Pilates than he does anything else outside of like, sport specific kind of training. Serena Williams, Misty May trainer, Tom Brady. Famously, he has his TB12 method, which, if you actually, it's how you were saying, looking at core exercise, you can see elements of Pilates. If you look at his TB12 method, a lot of it is Pilates based, which is really interesting. Like you're not seeing all this weight, all this load going through. You're seeing flexibility work, core work, stability work, and so it's one of those things where it's like you say, like I asked you that question, kind of like leading into like Pilates is good for everyone. Um, you see these people, and every single person on this list is a master of their craft, right? They have
Yeah.
reached the pinnacle in each of their sports. And you see it as like, oh, I want to be a great football player. I got to hit the gym. I got to do this, got to do that. So uh, for those of you out there, right, Pilates, definitely something that can help you, especially if you're someone who's athletic. And the big thing, if you watch a sporting event and you see, oh, I sprained my ankle, I've got a groin problem, I've got a hamstring problem, and things like that. A lot of times the injury happens when they're yielding to gravity, right? So on deceleration and things like that. So when you're, how high can I jump? How heavy can I push stuff? You're in your concentric phase, right? You're overcoming gravity. But the deceleration part is where all the action happens. And that's where a lot of your stabilizers come in, which makes Pilates so important.
Exactly, because Pilates works in the eccentric.
Yeah.
The majority of the work is in the eccentric phase. And as far as athletes go, when people come in and they're like, well, why should I do this as opposed to weight training? And I go, well, no, you shouldn't. I mean, you should be doing both things. But I said, Pilates, weight training will make you Arnold Schwarzenegger. Pilates will make you Bruce Lee. So who do you want to be? I mean, wouldn't it be nice to be a mixture of both of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I personally, I think now where I'm at, and kind of like the journey that I've been on fitness related in the past couple of years, I'd probably prefer to be Bruce Lee than Arnold, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I, that's how, I mean, wouldn't you rather move fast and quickly and be stabilized and balanced? I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger is amazing. But wouldn't you rather be like a little bit of both? So, because Arnold Schwarzenegger famously did Pilates. So, so yes, he did.
So it's kind of good for everyone. But when we get like super specific, right? So if I'm someone who just had a baby and I give birth to my baby,
Yes.
why might Pilates be good for me?
So, that's a great question. Pilates will flatten your belly, right? Because you are working your deep core muscles, right? Your transverse abdominals. It teaches you better breathing, right? Which is the only way that gets to your transverse abdominals is by deep breathing, right? Deep diaphragmatic breathing. It also too will get you a little bit more stable. Your body has just been carrying around all of this weight for a long time. You're a little bit unstable. um, it well, you get hypermobile when you're pregnant. So the flexibility part isn't really the part that you want to work on as postpartum, post pregnancy. You want to work on more of the stabilization stuff. Also too, it just gives you better control, and that's really what I think you lose. And as someone who has not had a child, I can only imagine that you're a little bit unstable, and you probably don't feel that great after pregnancy. That's just And that's probably somebody's personal. Some people I'm sure feel great. Some people don't.
Yeah, and it also um, what is the name of the what's it called when you have a baby? Obviously,
And
so
you
when
have a
you
cer- and you have a C-section.
well, yes, but not quite where I'm going.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Like, so obviously, when you have a child grow inside of you, your body's got to make room. So one of the things it does is it deconstructs your abdomen a little bit.
Right, right.
Right now, the hope for all of us out there is after you're done with that process, that comes back together naturally. But we live on Earth, and Earth doesn't quite work that way. So, like, what's that called when it doesn't come back?
You're talking about diastasis.
Yeah,
Diastasis. Yeah. So that's when your abdomen actually splits, right? And that's usually more common with C-sections than it is with vaginal birth, but that does occur. So when they actually give you when you actually have a C-section and they actually cut those muscles, Pilates naturally brings those muscles back together, from deep breathing, from deep core work, from just and there's no, you know, it just naturally does that. I mean, yeah, you can write a post pregnancy specific plan, but Pilates exercises in general just should bring those muscles back together. So, and as far as, and we haven't gone there yet, but I'm sure we're going to go into pre-pregnancy.
yeah.
Um, pre-pregnancy, it's balance, it's pelvic floor work, it's diaphragmatic breathing. It promotes better breathing. You're putting all this weight on and your body is unstable. Your joints are hypermobile. So you want to make sure that you're really steady and really balanced, as your body gets bigger and goes through these changes. So, um, and as our lovely, lovely friend Claire has mentioned, when she did Pilates with me when she was pregnant, she really, I think it made her much more aware of balance and stability. So, um,
So you touched on a key point in that one. Pelvic floor.
hmm,
It's probably, if you were to scan material out there, Instagram, any kind of research, it's probably one of the less talked about things affecting people. When so obviously your pelvic floor is about where you guessed it, it's the floor of your pelvis. So that can be influenced by what the contents are like inside of your torso.
right,
So
right.
it obviously has to move a little bit because if you have an increase in mass in your center, it's got to adjust that way you don't topple over. And the hope again is one of those things where it comes back, and you see a lot online, people doing weight training, and they're sitting. They never really seem to explain this part, which kind of gets on my nerves. Some people do. It depends, what their proficiency level is. When you do like a box sit squat, where you sit down and then you stand
Uh-huh.
up, right? Your
Yeah.
pelvic floor, to be able to sit down, your pelvic floor has to release. To be able to stand up, it has to contract again to get you to stand up. So some people obviously have trouble in that motion, and they'll compensate, and that their squat might look a little crazy. When you look in Pilates, what's happening in Pilates that's helping form that or create that a good pelvic floor, so that way you can continue on with your life?
So, you mean exercise wise? So, one of the basic concepts of Pilates is, so core so we so as far as core, I think we should break that down, right? So core is everything from your serratus anterior, posterior, right? Your internal, external obliques, your transverse abdominals, and your pelvic floor, your your glutes and your inner thighs. Now, when I say glutes, I'm talking about your ischial tuberosity or your sitting bones, right? That's the kind of lay term for your ischial tuberosity, which are the sitting bones that are in your butt, right? So if you were going to sit down and pull your sitting bones towards each other, that it is all about all your core work, right? So that's your core working in tandem. If you can get all of that stuff. Now, we could dive down the deep hole of like every single core muscle, but there's a lot of them in there. So we'll just stick to the basics. So, so your pelvic floor, right? as you're pulling your inner thighs and your ischial tuberosity together, as you engage with your belly button, like actually pulling your belly button up, just kind of how you want to think of engaging your abdominals. Your pelvic floor should naturally engage right there. And I hate to go. It's not doing it. You're not doing a Kegel. That's not what it is. Um, that's not what it is. That is a thing, but that's not what we're talking about in Pilates when we're talking about engaging your pelvic floor. We want to strengthen, down there, we want to strengthen the muscles that are pushing. So as you're exhaling and drawing your belly button up, your pelvic floor should naturally engage right there.
Awesome. Yes, and that's very important because if you or someone, if you or a loved one is experiencing a weak pelvic floor, trust
Yeah.
me, you know what's going. You know what's some of the bad parts about that are, aside outside of like exercise and fitness. So when you go through and look at some of the Pilates myths,
Yeah.
right? I think probably the most common one is Pilates is for women.
Okay. Yeah. When we see a lot of that, we hear a lot of that. Um, and again, just like I said in the beginning, the best way to understand Pilates and realize how hard it really is to come and do it. Right. So, and you mentioned all those professional athletes that are doing it. And we have a lot of men that actually come into the studio. And I think men are getting a little bit, that Pilates myth is getting a little bit debunked, as time goes on, and to any man who says, I thought this was a woman's workout, I would rebuke that by saying it was invented by a man for men. So, and then as of, and as we go back to Joseph Pilates' history, he used to train and rehabilitate soldiers. He also used to train men for the cavalry. So there are exercises there specifically for men, things called horseback, because men were riding on horseback at that time.
Yep.
So it is not a, it got, I think it kind of got that reputation when Joseph Pilates started training dancers. He started training ballet dancers and he would rehabilitate them when they were injured. And I think it kind of got, um, it got rerouted to being a woman's workout where men actually have the harder time doing Pilates because they're usually such big weight trainers. And weight trainers, real heavy weight trainers, are, as you know, are the ones who struggle the most.
Yeah. To give some context from my end, I've done a lot of hard shit, mostly because I enjoy doing hard shit. Right. So I've run 48 miles in 48 hours. I've deadlifted over 400 pounds, squatted over 300, almost at a 300-pound bench. There's a foot injury there, why those numbers are so close. So don't judge me. Um, I've done Spartan races. I've run 18 miles in one shot before. None of that stuff is as hard as like some of the more advanced stuff that we've done in the Pilates studio. And I'm like dying. And this is like the hardest thing I've ever fucking done. Like it is incredibly challenging.
Hmm. If it's done right, yeah.
Yeah. And like you'll start shaking and stuff like that. And it's just like, oh my God, like what is happening? And like you'll think, and like someone like me, like I just like a lot of times I like to power through stuff. And that was something that I could not do in Pilates. So I found it to be one of the most challenging things that you can do.
Yeah, and that's why, because Pilates movements are small, right? Weight training, running, all of the other modalities usually of exercise, are usually pretty big movements. They're not small, detailed, precise things, and that's what Pilates is. Look at it like from almost like a surgical standpoint, right? You see surgeons when they're doing like, they're really concentrating and they're really, they're closing or they're slicing up something or they're closing something. They're sweating, they're focused, and the movements are so small and detailed that's where it just makes you sweat. So that's what I equate Pilates to. It's small, detailed, precise things where you don't get to move really big a lot. The small movements are harder, and that encourages and incorporates and promotes precision, right? Control, and that's what you want to have, especially as you get older. Balance and control are huge because we lose them as we age. So, we have my demographic, the demographic in Pilates, there's a lot of older, it's an older demographic. Also too, it's great on your joints, right? You're not lifting heavy weights. You're not, you don't have to, throw big weights around to really get fit. And it's kinder, it's gentler, there's no inflammation. You don't have to wait a day before you do it again. There's no muscle breakdown to repair. Pilates is a modality that can be done every single day. You know, do I think everybody should do it every single day? If that's all you're doing, then yeah, I think you should do it every day. But I think that you need to incorporate that. You need to have a well-rounded program, right? You should be doing some type of cardiovascular. You should be doing some type of weight training. You should be doing some kind of flexibility modality stuff. So, um, but and as much as I love Pilates, it's not my one form of exercise. I mean, I do that probably more than I do anything else, but it's not the only thing I do.
For sure. Another big one. You hear this very often. I alluded to this at the beginning. Pilates is just like yoga.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I hear that a lot too. So the difference between Pilates and yoga, and there are many things, is, there's no spirituality in Pilates, right? So you're not meditating at the end of class. There's no, there's no reflecting there. That's one of the big things. Um, I tend to think that yoga focuses a little bit more on your flexibility, where in Pilates, flexibility is kind of incorporated into the workout. It's not what we focus on, but it's an aspect, right? So you will get more flexible in Pilates, just like in yoga, you will get some core strength. But as somebody who has done both Pilates and yoga and was a yoga instructor and did yoga before I started doing Pilates, when I started to do Pilates, I started doing yoga differently because it made me much more aware of me in space and where I was working from, where I didn't actually learn that in yoga. So there are things that are great about both modalities. Joseph Pilates did yoga. There's a lot of Pilates that is based on it, but the difference is significant. Um, that tends to be my biggest thing. My two biggest things is that there's no spirituality. We're not meditating, and there is a little bit more, in my eyes, strength of a strength aspect in. And obviously, you're using equipment in Pilates, and not all Pilates. There is mat Pilates. There's Pilates that is done on a mat, like yoga, but apparatus Pilates is much different, right? It's much different than yoga. You're obviously using equipment.
Yeah. So when you look at another one that is also, because you just touched on Matt, a big perception. If you look in a lot of gyms, you'll see them offering some form in their group fitness offering. They've got like some form of mat, and it's like, well, Pilates is too
hmm
hard. I'm gonna go hit the mats in the class. Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
So mat work is actually the hardest thing you do, right? Mat work is you have to do all the exercises without any assistance, right? On the reformer, or or the chair, or the tower, or the Cadillac, you have assistance and resistance from the springs. In mat work, you're doing all of the work. There is no feedback. There is no resistance. There is nothing helping you to get into those exercises. So a myth is that the mat comes first and then you get to the equipment. It's really the other way around. The mat work is all there to make the reformer and all of the other pieces of apparatus are all there to make your mat work better. The mat is the ideal. The mat is what you're really working for. So and when you see it get offered in group fitness, that's all great. Pilates is Pilates is Pilates. You know, Classical work is a little bit harder than something that's like maybe a Pilates fusion class, or maybe like a PIO class, like a Pilates/yoga class. The classical work is in the repertoire is, um, in my opinion, is much harder than anything like that. So, uh, and as far as Pilates done on equipment, it is a lot of time and a lot of training to be a good Pilates instructor. So, if anybody tells you that they're a Pilates instructor, like they took a weekend course and they're a Pilates instructor, they're probably not a good Pilates instructor. So, and I can say that with fairly a good amount of certainty. So, as somebody who's been in this business for a long time and has spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours perfecting my craft. So,
It's a good thing you brought that up. So I can attest to what you just said because I did Pilates training 4 weekends, like 9 hours a day, and had to memorize the process, the order, and then I started doing Pilates, and I was like, holy shit,
yeah.
it's a lot. So I like to view things that people do, just like you said, like a craft. And I think Pilates is one of those things that's right up there with like if I were to become a master blacksmith, right? How many swords do I have to make? How many hours do I spend doing it? And can I get to 10,000 hours of doing this thing? And I'd wager you're well over 10,000 hours deep in Pilates. But like that mastery that goes through it and that evolution of the movement science is just ridiculously impressive from like an instructing standpoint. And also, if you're someone who's been doing Pilates lifelong, it's almost like yes, you're mastering the craft of Pilates, but like subliminally mastering the movement of your body
Hmm.
over that much time. So it becomes super, super, super important, especially in a field like that, right?
I tend to equate Pilates, and just from that standpoint, Pilates is practice, right? So you're never not learning. You've never mastered it. You've doing it or teaching it. You've never mastered it. You're continually learning. Like karate, right? It's like a martial art. You go to whatever studio you're going to practice. You're always trying to get better. There's always more to learn. There's always a way to do it differently. There's no one way is not the right way. There's always variations of things. You know, um, I like to say whether you're doing classical Pilates or you're doing contemporary Pilates, Pilates is Pilates. As long as you're moving and it's safe, it's good. It's all good. Um, but it's always a practice. It's always a journey. You're never done. You're never at the end. Okay. I don't care how many years you're doing it. And if you think that you know everything about Pilates, you need to stop teaching it because you don't, and you just don't. You just never will. It's always a journey.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I definitely appreciate that in the craft and the mastery, and it's super rewarding. So, Danielle, you mentioned talking about contemporary Pilates to classic Pilates, and then we have things like Club Pilates going on nowadays. So, like, talk to me about that, the differences and the nuance in that.
So the difference between classical Pilates and and more contemporary Pilates is classical Pilates pretty much follows a repertoire, right? So there are pretty much exercises that you do in order, and while you can go a little bit out of the repertoire of it, you basically stay within the frame of that work. Um, you know, with more contemporary Pilates, it's a little bit more a la carte. Like you can kind of pick and choose exercises that go here or here or here or here, but that doesn't actually follow a set repertoire like a classical modality does. As far as Club Pilates goes, Club Pilates is a little bit more group fitness based in the way of it's 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 a little bit more of a group fitness class. It incorporates things like the Bosu. I think it uses the reformer as a little bit more of more like a piece of weight training equipment than it does as an actual piece of apparatus that works your core. Uh, they're doing things like TRX and using pieces of Pilates equipment in a more group fitness kind of area. Area is not the right word. In a more group fitness type of style, I should say. Uh, in a classical Pilates studio, it should work like a training program. You should be progressing and getting stronger by doing the exercises repetitively. and that's how you layer on in a classical setting. Whereas with Club Pilates, while it's great that people are moving, and I never want to discourage that, I just think that it when you walk into a classical studio and you tell the instructors that you're doing Club Pilates, they're just kind of they're kind of a little bit like, well, you know, that's not really what we're doing here. Um, and as far as classical Pilates instructors versus somebody who comes to me from a Club Pilates studio, I kind of look at it like this. And now we're not doctors, but I use this kind of I use this as a way of comparing. I say we're all doctors, right? I'm a doctor. You're a Pilates instructor. You're a doctor. But in my studio, I'm doing cardiology. And you're telling me you're walking in here and you're like, I'm a doctor. I do pediatrics. And I go, great, you're a doctor, but we're doing cardiology here. And I can't teach you the aspects of doing cardiology. I respect what you do, but that's not what we're doing here. So, you know, that's kind of the difference between uh, in a very in a very general way of the difference between uh, when a Club Pilates instructor walks into my studio and wants a job. I just can't make it work because
Yeah.
the it's or it's like if you're a martial arts instructor and somebody comes in and they're like, I do karate, and you're like, well, great, but this is jujitsu. You're like, I can't really make this translate over. So, um, again, it has its place. It's all good. Movement is good. It's just not what we do in classical work. So,
That's a pretty good explanation.
it was a long-winded explanation. Sorry.
Oh no, it's definitely okay. I mean, you see a lot of that too, and just on the fitness side of it too, where you have, specific training, or you have F45, you have Orange Theory, um,
Yeah.
CrossFit. Although CrossFit has it's like its own sport, so that's a little different there. But um, yeah, so definitely some good value. So what are some of the things that you've seen like success stories in people? So I sent you a study that was done in Australia.
Hmm. Yeah.
It looked over many of the benefits of health and fitness modalities, so exercise, Pilates, yoga, walking on people who have for mental health or disorders. Not so much
Right. Right.
super disordered to the fact of like you got crazy stuff going on, but like a good range of them, including anxiety, depression, and what they found was everyone improved with some form of activity better than they would with therapy, better than they would with pharmaceutical drugs,
Medication. Yeah.
medication. And Pilates specifically, they pointed out people seem to have better with anxiety and stuff like that. So, talk to me about some of that, like why you think that is, and like some success stories that you've seen with that.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed that study. I really loved reading it. The what I got out of it was, the release of serotonin, right? So just moving, your body naturally releases serotonin. Your body's meant to move, right? So it would make sense that when you're moving and serotonin is released, you're naturally going to feel better. If you have some kind of anxiety or mental issue going on, you know, and as somebody who doesn't have that, I'm going to try and put myself in somebody else's shoes with it would seem like you would feel out of control. You would feel like there are things that you can't control. Pilates puts you in control of things, in control of yourself, in control of your body, in control of your mind. Because as you know, as Pilates instructor, you can't go into a Pilates studio and be thinking about 16 other things. You'll never do it right. You have to be in present and in the moment. And I think being in a Pilates studio where it's a small space and you don't get to check out and think about whatever you want kind of makes you feel a little bit more in control of things. Also, too, there's the breathing aspect of it, right? So the deep breathing of it all should calm you down and get you focused in on what you're doing and get you out of your head, put that in quotations, get you out of your head for an hour. So, you know, that's where I think Pilates really benefits the calming aspect of it, and yes, yoga is also calming too, but I also think you get a little bit more free reign in yoga because it's not so um not that it's not precise because it is, but with Pilates, it's more, I feel like it's a little more specific. Like you've really got to hone in on what you're doing, or else, your mind's going to wander because we're all, overstimulated at this point in time. So, and Pilates, and that's why a lot of people can't do Pilates, or they don't want to do Pilates, or they don't succeed or feel like they succeed in Pilates because they can't focus, they can't regroup, and they can't redirect themselves to, hey, this is like, this is my hour. And that's something that I say to my clients. I'm like, look, this is our hour. You need to stay here with me. I need you with me. Don't be thinking about what you're getting at Target in 55 minutes.
Target.
You know what I mean? Like you're not shopping. We're working out for an hour, and then you can go and do whatever it is you need to do.
Yeah, for sure. To the point that you were just talking, it kind of, for me, it kind of reminds me of that old movie Major Payne, like the comedy. It's like the kids movie. He's the crazy drill instructor, and like he's this crazy dude. And they're showing him like when he was in like war, and like this guy breaks his, or he like gets his leg cut off or something like that, or some crazy injury. And he's like, "You want me to give you something to take your mind off that pain?" And he just breaks his finger. It's kind of like that. Because
Right.
once you start going, it's like whatever you're thinking about, it's just like, oh shit, my core, like I'm shaking and like I'm gonna die, and like it just completely takes you away from reality, which is awesome.
Yeah, which I think, is it's a nice reprieve, right? It's a nice little reprieve of like feeling in control of yourself, even if it's just for a little bit, a little while. And, hopefully you take that deep breathing and that feeling of calm and that feeling of of control, and you bring it out into the world, right? Along with the physical part of doing Pilates, of bringing it out into the world, of feeling a little bit more strong, of not getting injured when you rotate or bend over and pick something up, or you're carrying bags in from the grocery store. All of the things that you do in regular life, Pilates should translate into that. It should translate into regular life. You can work on the chair, like going up front. Anthony is meant to simulate going up steps. It's
It's a
so
little
it's
bit harder than going up the stairs.
yeah, yeah, no, it is. It totally is. But it's a good way to teach people to use their glutes and both of their legs as they pull themselves up steps, because we all dump into our top leg, right? And I find a lot of people, oh, my knees hurt, I have trouble going up steps. I'm like, well, you're probably not using both glutes, you're probably not using both legs to get you up, so let's work on that. So, uh as far as that goes, Pilates is very, in my opinion, very good for somebody who um, is struggling with any kind of, mental or anxiety or mental health issues. Gets you kind of to redirect and focus.
Yeah, and it's good that you mention outside of the studio, like life out there, in the context of what we're talking about. A lot of times, if you are someone who has depression, anxiety, or you're sedentary and your body doesn't move quite well, there's a lot of things that like unduly are going to cause you some stress or anxiety. Like it's like, hey, let's go for a hike, and you're like, I don't move very well, or I don't feel like I move well, or I can't do that, and like it kind of like limits you. And I have a particular belief that if you can influence the way a person interacts with the world by making them healthier, making them move better, making them more aware of what they are capable of doing, and maybe fix some shortcomings as far as like deficiencies they have, it's going to change the way that they interact with the world around them.
Hmm. Right.
And ultimately, it's just going to lead to a better, a net positive outcome, because they are more confident. They're not afraid of falling down the stairs. They're not afraid of, you know, being at the store for too long because they're going to be exhausted, and now they can be better with other people that they interact with. You
Yes.
see people who, they gain confidence, and when they gain confidence, suddenly they're doing better at work, they're doing better in relationships, they're suddenly finding themselves, wow, this is like my winning era, as they like to call it now. And it's a huge thing and so I'm glad that you touched on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I find, as people that I train, you're talking about people who, are struggle at the grocery store and stuff like that. They're the most, as looking at it from a selfish standpoint, or maybe a little bit of ego, they're the people who make you better Pilates instructors, better trainers, right? They're also the people who are the most gratifying people to train, right? Athletes, I love training athletes. They're fun. You could do crazy stuff with them, but they're easy. They're easy to train. The people who really challenge you, the people who make you better, are the people who come in who are injured, people who are sedentary, people who have issues, back pain, you know, ankle pain, knee pain, hip pain. They're the people who really challenge you. They make you think and they make you be better, because now you're trying to, they're the people who are really the most, and again, this is probably self-serving, but they're the people who are the most grateful, because they make the biggest strides. They make the biggest improvements in their life and in their lifestyle, right? They're the people who want to get on the ground with their grandkids. They're the people who want to, walk around the block and not have pain. They're the people who just want to do the basic everyday things. And they're the people who really make you a better trainer. If you have a plan for somebody and they walk in and they're like, oh, I slept bad, and my neck hurts today and my back hurts today and this hurts today, and then you got to redirect. You can't, maybe your plan's not going to work that day. You have to kind of shift and, roll something off the top of your head that's going to help this person hopefully feel better and not exacerbate what they've already got going on. So I'm always the people who are a little bit of a conundrum are really the people who I feel I enjoy working with the most, and are the they're the people who will stay with you because you've made them feel better. They're the people who will be your clients, your people forever, because they're perfect example. Yvonne, she's never leaving you or me.
Yeah.
I mean, she loves us, right? And it's because of how we make her feel. We make her feel great. And, she has come leaps and bounds from when she started with you and me. And, I couldn't be more proud of her. She is just, she, even if she feels like she can't do something, she'll still try. You could throw whatever you want at her. She'll try it.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that. So, um, they're the people who make you better.
Yeah, that you just dropped a gem. So for those of you that listen that have clients or are trainers and you have clients, what you bring out of them by what you introduce them is like the most important thing, right? And a lot of times and I mean, just to be super realistic here, if you're a trainer and you have a client, you're probably never going to turn them into a bodybuilder unless they're already a bodybuilder, or unless they're a trainer or something like that. You're taking the average person and you're introducing them to a way to make their life better. So they came to you because, as one of my clients, when he puts water down for his dogs, it takes him like 10 minutes to stand up because his back was destroyed. Right now, that's an easy thing. That's nothing. Like we're not afraid to do that anymore. We can do that with ease. It doesn't set our day back. I have another client who 3 months post rotator tear surgery / shoulder reconstruction was like, my shoulder's always in pain and I can't move it. And I'm like, okay. 6 months later, we're benching back up to his average weight, and he doesn't even really have a shoulder. Some might say that my method was a little insane as far as getting him there, but he has that confidence back. Okay, I'm older. I can now I can move like I was when a doctor told me that this wasn't going to happen, or a therapist told me that, yeah, you might want to scale it back, buddy. So the more you do things like that and bring back the parts of their youth that they were convinced that they lost, the better the experience for you, the client, and just everyone involved is going to be long
And
term.
the more they trust you, and they're going to listen to what you have to say. They're going to, if they'll listen to you, and they will do and say, I can't tell you how many times people go, well, I go, we're going to do this, and they go, well, I trust you. And it's like, okay. And that is means the world. I mean, to have somebody say, I completely believe in your abilities to make me better because we've done A, B, and C, and I see the results. I feel the results. I can do these things that I used to do, and it doesn't hurt. I mean, that's why we all get into this business. We get into this business to help people, and you know, it you get into it knowing that you're probably not going to be a fulfillionaire doing it. So uh, you can be successful, you know, but unless you're training celebrities, you're definitely not doing this for the money. So
Thank you for sharing your insight with us, your years of experience with your Pilates craft.
I am happy. I was so happy to come on and talk to you because I haven't seen you in forever, number one. But I well, anytime, Aunt.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for joining me. I've had a blast talking to you. We'll have to do this again sometime.
I would love to.